My name is Kate Faulkner. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Asheville Art Museum, and we are delighted that everyone is here tonight for our program in conversation with our distinguished guest, Jerald Melberg. This evening, we have the privilege of hearing Mr. Melberg speak about the extraordinary artwork of the legendary artist, Romare Bearden. As lender to the current exhibition, Romare Bearden Ways of Working, which is on view through January 22nd, the museum is able to share Bearden's important artworks with the Western North Carolina community and beyond. We appreciate Mary and Jerald Melberg for their longstanding support of the artists and Asheville Art Museum. Mr. Melberg has been involved in the visual arts for close to 50 years and has been pivotal in promoting and celebrating the arts during his time. Opening over 40 years ago, the Jerald Melberg Gallery represents artists such as Romare Bearden, the renowned American collagist of the 20th century, Wolf Kahn, and Robert Motherwell, among others. Prior to the gallery's opening, Jerald served as curator at the Mint Museum of Art. So following tonight's presentation, we will reserve some time for Q&A with Jerald. And also at this time, please remember to silence your cell phones during the presentation. Thank you again so much for joining us for tonight's talk, and please join me in extending a warm welcome to Jerald Melberg.
Thank you, Kate. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I greatly appreciate your coming out on a Thursday afternoon at 5 o'clock, joining me. I am just gobsmacked by the Asheville Art Museum and the job that they're doing here. The collection is really incredible. The installations are always great. It's a real gem, and I've been fortunate to be involved in it for quite a while, haven't I, Pam? So, if eventually I have to decide to sit down, please excuse me for doing so. You know, it's hell getting older.
Hear, hear.
And on that note, okay, I'm thrilled to be here. I have decided to present to you my own collage, a patchwork quilt, if you will. Just as Bearden borrowed, appropriated from different magazines, books, catalogs to create his collages, I have pasted together words from many sources, primarily my own, and Bearden's words as well. Bearden once said, "It's not what you see as much as what you feel." My desire this evening is for you to feel the man. Romare Bearden would leave his fifth-floor walk-up apartment and stride along Canal Street, past the second-hand stores and trucks grinding to the Holland Tunnel, crisp in a blue jumpsuit, blue cap covering his bald head. He moved with a city dweller's quickness, giving no hint of his southern origins. Bearden headed via subway for his studio in Queens. It's good to have a studio, otherwise I'd be getting up in the middle of the night to work. Almost every day he went to the studio, working roughly 9 to 5 to create the collage paintings that made him famous. Bearden's daily journey to his studio is part of a larger one. begun in Charlotte, North Carolina, where he was born in 1911. The journey took him from the rural South to Harlem, to Paris, and to the top of the art world. If you're any kind of an artist, you make a miraculous journey, and you come back and make some statements in shapes and colors of where you were. Bearden was born at his great-grandfather's house at 401 South Graham Street on the morning of September 2nd, into a prosperous and respectable middle-class family. The wide porch had a wind harp, and in front, a flower garden. His parents, Richard Howard and Bessie Johnson Bearden, lived there with Bearden's great-grandparents. He was named Fred Romare Howard Bearden. I dropped the Fred. I didn't need all those names. Before Bearden was 4 years old, they moved to New York City. They returned to Charlotte with Bearden for summers until his great-grandmother died in 1925. Bearden was 14. During the 20s and 30s, an upsurge of literature, music, and painting called the Harlem Renaissance made for a cultural feast. In Harlem, Bearden's mostly Irish, Jewish, and Italian schoolmates also contributed to his ecumenical view of the world. But it was at home where his famous conscience was honed. Romy would listen to the conversations around the family dining table as Mrs. Bearden filled her house with such great guests as poets Claude McKay, Langston Hughes, and pianist Fats Waller. Harlem was jumping. Connie's Inn and the Lafayette Theater, well-known night spots, were near the Bearden apartment. Bearden drank in the music, the jazz, the blues, all of which figure largely in his work. He met success early. In 1940, before he was 30, he had a one-man show in a Harlem studio. After Army service, Caress Crosby, the patroness of Salvador Dali, gave Bearden a show in Washington, D.C. In 1945, he had his first one-man exhibition in a New York gallery. In 1954, his life further stabilized with his marriage to Nanette Rohan, whom he met at a benefit party to help the survivors of a West Indies hurricane. Bearden was stirred by the civil rights movement. In 1963, he and other black artists formed an organization called the Spiral Group to share ideas and support artists. Almost by accident, Bearden made an artistic breakthrough. The Spiral Group artists talked about working on one collective project. Bearden thought that collage would do, and brought a box of clippings from his wife's magazines. No one was interested. Bearden went ahead, gluing the clippings to typewriter paper, his first collage. The success of these early riveting works enabled Bearden to devote himself full-time to making his art. By the end of the 60s, he was regularly exhibiting in the prestigious venues throughout the country, Time and Fortune magazines put Bearden's on their cover. Even after achieving renown in the 60s, Bearden kept at it. Real artists work like that. They don't wait for inspiration to fly in the window. Bearden was a real artist, and a great one. At his death on March 12, 1988, he was called the foremost black artist of the last half of the 20th century. So he was. But the phrase black artist must be understood as a description, not a label. Bearden's reputation rests on two things. One was his ability with collage. Bearden stretched its possibilities, raising it to a mode of expression so intensely personal that it is difficult to think of another artist so closely associated with it. The other was his ability to portray the lives of black people, to see behind the everyday something enduring and joyful. He has been called the pictorial historian of the black world. His collages reflect optimism. Even in works that represent poverty, there's still a sense of affirmation and strength. But he knew another world as well, an inner world of imagination and memory that was as vivid as what he saw on the subway every day. For him, the past wasn't the past, it was now. In February 1984, he wrote me a letter about an upcoming exhibition of his work at my gallery. All the continuing best to you in the gallery and the gallery ghosts. I'm sure all my folks at Pinewood came to see what little Romy was up to. Pinewood, just blocks from my gallery, is a cemetery where generations of his relatives are buried. With his imagination and humor, he could easily picture them stealing a glance at little Romy's work. Bearden's memories were the subject of his art, but he wasn't interested in merely describing his experiences. He didn't care if a cabin in one of his collages was faithful to the original. Perfection ain't interesting, he used to say. Mr. Bearden wanted to transform his experiences, to find the particulars in every day, the universal emotions and ideas of all people. I'm trying to explore, in terms of the particulars of the life I know best, those things common to all cultures. Bearden said that he wanted in his collages to bring the Afro-American experience into art and give it a universal dimension. It is clear that he succeeded. Romy was an artist who helped us to see and to feel not only the experiences of the African American, but to recognize the cultural diversity that is part of all of us in our lives. Bearden's art was never just for African Americans. just as Picasso's art was never just for Spaniards. Rather, Bearden was an artist who experimented with a wide range of techniques in order to find a way to merge art, cultural heritage, and social commentary. As life is made of layers of experiences, Bearden layered his compositions with imagery, colors, shapes, forms. He built upon his experience of life. Bearden depicted the role of the land, the beauty and the power of African American women, masks, magic, rituals, myths, and jazz, transcending the ethnic identity. Bearden did not just see and tell, but revealed the poetry intrinsic to modern American life. The people populating Bearden's art were not meant to be specific individuals, but rather they were archetypes. Bearden turned faces in and out, combined photographs with paint, put big hands on small bodies, small hands on big bodies, but making each object and each head and hand a different material, he almost obliged us to see details independently and as part of the whole. It was clear from his work that Bearden loved everything about art. He trusted materials, trusted the creative process, trusted the people who spoke to him in and across his paper. His art grew freer, wiser, and more poignant in a way that is rare in post-war American art. Bearden was a grand improviser who knew all the rules of virtuoso collagist, who for cutting, tearing, daubing, pasting, was both an interior journey and a narrative adventure. His work is spontaneous, informal, rigorous, and sensual. Whether he was composing scenes of New York and New York streets, or quilting together family gatherings in the rural South, there is a sense of the artist as poet. Those whose duty it is to give voice to the members of human comedy that cannot always speak for themselves. Indeed, working on paper identified his art not only with musical scores, but also with scripture, and the collages have a voluptuous immediacy when they are looking at what seems to have been just managed to emerge. When he journeyed back in his imagination to Mecklenburg County, Bearden could salvage images of superstition, sexuality, and silence that belong to everyone. Bearden's culture was important. It is a key to the humanity of his work. It is also key to why, for a long time, he had remained an outsider. Despite receiving the National Medal of Arts in 1987. From the way he cut, brushed, smudged, painted, it was clear that every single aspect of the artistic process had meanings for him. In his hands, water, paste, paper became instruments of an orchestra, threads of a novel. Bearden's feeling for art, ritual, and magic go hand in hand. Images often took shape out of the paper itself. It is as if the artist laid down one color, then another, then one shape suggested itself, then another, and gradually relationships developed and the whole began to sing. Work seemed conjured, even pulled out of a hat. Once you get going, Bearden said, all sorts of things begin to open up. Sometimes something just falls into place, like piano keys that every now and then just seem to be right where your fingers happen to come down. But there are also all those times you have to keep trying something over and over. And then when you finally get it right, you wonder what took you so long. And of course, there are also times when you have to give it up and try something else, which sometimes turns out just great as the beginning of another totally different picture. In Bearden's collages, in 1964, Bearden's collages burst upon the scene at the height of the civil rights movement. Subject matter, memories of his past in Mecklenburg County, Harlem, came rushing back. With the distortions of scale and spliced faces, the collages seemed to be symbols of a particular moment in American history. But as Bearden was to prove in the last 25 years of his career, they were much more than that. If art is a journey, Bearden had reached his homeland with the art of his collages. He had moored himself in the deep waters of his personal past, in memories of that past, and he spent the last 25 years of his life perfecting the medium, collage, that permitted him to plumb the depths of his memory, to bring back the fragments of his American heritage and place them together, creating the body of works for which he is best known. Romare Bearden's visual revelations are the work of a master interpreter who recalls and describes the past in ways that gave it fresh meaning and relevance. Ultimately, what emerges most dramatically and vividly from Bearden's art is his celebration of life, his deeply felt kinship with nature and living things, his fundamental humanity and manifest love for the people he portrayed. I keep going back, for some reason, to Mecklenburg County. I can't explain it. In his mind's eye, Bearden said, after all, he was a city man. He spent most of his childhood in Harlem, and for the last 35 years of his life, lived on Canal Street at the edge of Chinatown. But his imagination kept drawing him back to the countryside north of Charlotte, where Bearden spent summers at the time of his growing up, when memories become indelible. Is it difficult to recall what happened and how things felt more than 50 years ago? He was once asked. not if the past is part of the present. Time has been made for convenience, but time does not need to be measured by a watch. Things that happened to you that were pleasurable you can remember, and forget things that happened yesterday. Another time, he said, I believe the function of the artist is to find ways of communication in sensible, sensuous terms, those experiences which do not find adequate expression in the daily round of living, and for which, therefore, no ready-made means of communication exists. In the later part of his career, Bearden sought to make his images more accessible to more people. He began working with master printers such as Mohammed Khalil and Bob Blackburn. Bearden realized that printmaking was an outlet for experimentation and for broadening one's audience. He did not hesitate to borrow ideas and images from his collages and transform them in his prints. For Bearden, the print was as an important medium that offered a creative complement to his collages. He enjoyed making prints, seeing the innovative imagery he brought to the collage, transformed and enhanced with the help of a master printer. In 1973, Bearden was commissioned to make an etching. Together with Bob Blackburn, Bearden created this excellent print, The Train, which broke new ground in printmaking. Using screens set before portions of Bearden's collages, the printer made a black and white photo of the image. This process, using differently designed meshes overlaid each time, created a final photo so complicated that only a person involved in the process could guess how it had been made. When asked the meaning of the emphasis on the train, Bearden explained that a train was one of the most important things in the lives of African American children in the South. Each train had a name which they knew, and as it passed, they could dream about and associate with the images of the cities to which the train was going, cities they had never seen. There. Bearden used all major printmaking processes freely, combining them, exchanging elements of them all, and yet skirting the edges of outright rule breaking. Because he always was in control, whether using lithography, etching, or silkscreen. What constitutes a Bearden print is a difficult assessment. His combination of print mediums with painting, collage, and photography complicates the issue. However, an overview of the majority of what might be easily considered a graphic work gives the Bearden enthusiast an idea of his versatility in technique, style, themes, and yet a unity of spirit. In October 1990, Romney had his retrospective, which I had the honor of organizing at the Mint Museum in Charlotte, the city of his birth. People came from many parts of the country to celebrate Romey. It was a demonstration of the great love all of these people had for Romey, the artist. Equally, it was a demonstration of the great love that everyone had for Romey, the person. The morning after the opening, Romey was scheduled to give a talk to a group of African American children in age from about 9 to 12. Present were about a dozen boys and girls in Romey, talking not down to them, but with them, and his gentle voice reaching to them and embracing them with his words. Hanging on the classroom walls were reproductions of works by other famous black artists. And he talked not only about the paintings, but about the artists themselves, where they sprang from, the history of their period, and the lives they led. And when he said, soberly, gently, embracing them with his words, "So you see, children, each of these painters had a beginning, but no real end, because they all made a contribution to the painters who followed them." I knew that some of those children had a glimmer of what Romey was talking about, the continuation of life through a contribution in art. This can be further demonstrated through a letter I would like to read to you. It is from Romey to a Charlotte grade school student. Dear Clarence, Mrs. Shaw, one of your teachers, wrote me about your splendid talent for art. Since I am an artist, this pleased me very much. It's always nice to know of someone with your interests. Also, let me tell you that I was born in Charlotte when it was a sleepy little town, not the big city that it is now. So you can understand it is especially warming to hear of someone from your own hometown who is doing so well, not only in his art endeavors, but in all his subjects. One of the things about being an artist, Clarence, is that you don't have to deal with words. Our pictures explain the way we feel. Since, in this case, I can't paint my feelings, let me say that I'm proud of you and hope that you will enjoy this book of mine. Continue to make your mother and your teachers think as highly of you as they do now. Remember always, this talent that you have has been given to you, entrusted to you, to have people see and feel and understand that world as you do. You have the insight which others of us are not as blessed with. However, when you share your talent with others, they too have the benefit of your blessing. As you continue, and I trust yours will be a long and fruitful life, you will only be as good an artist as you are a human being. Sincerely, Romare Bearden, April 1978. The world is poor for the loss of this noble, generous, greatly gifted human being. But what Romy said to those children that morning in Charlotte, and to Clarence in his letter, is equally true of Romy. The continuation of life through a contribution in art. Romy's contribution is solid. He will continue to teach artists for a long time. His work will inform the totality of art for a long, long time. In this sense, Romare Bearden continues to live. I'm sure no one has any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Jerald, would you please tell us a little about your personal relationship with Romare Bearden?
I loved Romare Bearden. We knew each other the last 15 years of his life, and I looked at him almost like another grandfather. When I would come to visit him in New York, of course at the time, I would call him from the corner cell phone, a cell phone, a telephone booth. And I'd say, Romy, I'm here. He said, I'll be right down. 5th floor walk up. My goodness. And he'd come in, and there he'd appear at the door. And we would meet on many occasions about many different things. When I was organizing the retrospective at the Mint, we would sit across from his desk, and he'd go through old address books.
Here's some information. And to do this, we've got to go back to the beginning.
Uh-oh.
Genesis, and look at the creation account.
Is that you, Mary?
No.
Oh.
Your phone.
My phone?
That wasn't my phone.
Well, I left mine out on purpose. He, he would go through all these address books, and I said, oh, I think this person owns something. And so I'd write all this down, and then I'd do all the research to put together the 57 works that was in the retrospective. It was from 1970 to 1980. It picked up where the Museum of Modern Art show ended. What is going on?
It's your phone.
Your phone.
Okay, my phone? So, I was thrilled to have been the curator of this massive show for Romy. Putting it together was quite a task, as you might imagine. Finding works, I'd go to a Sunday afternoon, I'd visit somebody's home in Atlanta to see a collage, not this has anything to do with what we're talking about, but when I went there that Sunday afternoon to see the collage, Richard Pryor was there. When well, you all don't know my whole history, but I was curator at the Mint Museum for 7 years, and then the museum was closing, completely closing for 14 or 18 months because of construction. And so some people came to me and said, we think it's time Charlotte has an art gallery, we think you should do it. So that's what happens. So I was in New York, and having lunch with Bearden, which almost always when I'd go to see him in the studio, he'd say, well, come about 11 so we can go to lunch afterwards. And it's a little Chinese place that he loved. And he would never allow me to pay the bill. Because at least for me, I think it was something within him that I am able to do this. So we're sitting there and I said, Romy, I need to tell you that I'm going to be leaving the museum. And he looked at me and said, well, I've already heard. I said, well then you must know that I'm going to open a gallery in Charlotte, in your hometown. And I would be so honored if I could represent you. And he looked across the table again and said, I was going to be very disappointed if you didn't ask. He was a gentleman. I never saw anger. I found him to be enormously bright. So bright that he would intimidate me. He didn't know that he did, but he would intimidate me. Someone else? Yes, sir.
You showed a slide of the Spiral Association in the first exhibit. It looked like, I can't remember all the content. What was the point of the Spiral group in terms of, did they fundraise or did they?
No, it was a group of artists who wanted to do some things collectively, socially, civilly, which they did. But, you know, this one particular meeting, Bearden thought they should do a collage. Nobody was interested, so that was a beginning point for Bearden.
That's when he introduced his photo montage idea, I guess, or that you showed a slide of that afterwards, I think.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. I see some old friends, at least one old friend.
Thanks.
Who else?
I was fascinated by the variety of printmaking styles that he used, that you
And there's
loved.
even more out in the show.
Well, I know it, but I mean, I was really surprised. I didn't realize he had tested and played with so many. Did he, was there a particular printer that he liked to work with other than Blackburn?
Blackburn and Muhammad Khalil were the two.
But what about, so some of even the screen prints and everything like that they did with Blackburn, or
That
were
was,
there other
the screen
studios?
prints was with,
Well, one of them was the folks who are still in business in New York.
what's the name of the company?
In New Jersey,
Uh,
Mojo
Mojo Portfolio.
Okay.
Did
There were
some of the
many
screen
printers.
printing.
So did he seek them out, or did people
I
come in
don't
and
know
ask him
how
to
they
work?
made that connection. Well, I do know that Bearden and Blackburn were good friends. And there are 3 or 4 examples of the monotypes that are in this show. Blackburn and Bearden would work on Saturday mornings on monoprints. Because Blackburn had the presses and the know-how. So Bearden, if you look at those works, they're very different from the collages. He would paint onto a piece of plexiglass. Now, if we were to take a big juicy brush load of paint and pull it across a piece of paper, what's going to happen? The paint's going to soak in. There's going to be some drag to the brush because of the tooth of the paper. Now, if you take that same brush load of paint and you draw it across a piece of plexiglass, well, your brush is going to move much more freely. The brush, it's not going to absorb what you put down on the plexiglass. It will show the brush mark much, much differently. So Bearden would make these, and then they would print them on an etching press, where he was able to get a spontaneous, almost, result to the process. Oh, good, no more questions. Yes, ma'am.
Did you mention his meeting with the patron of Salvador Dali? Did you mean the Gallery Beautiful? Because I missed.
No,
Who
no,
was it?
I just used that example to set who she was. Caress, I can't remember right now, Crosby. She was the patroness of Dolly, but she also helped other artists and helped Bearden. Yes, sir.
Where might one go in future days to learn even more about this remarkable artist?
Well, several places to go. We have file drawers full at the gallery. If you simply want to just flip through them, you're welcome anytime. The Romare Bearden Foundation would be of considerable help. Those are the two places I would suggest that you go.
The Bearden Foundation has fabulous resources on their website.
Yes, their website is excellent.
And then Kate's been showing the film about Bearden. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, but we can turn it on once we adjourn into the gallery, so it'll be playing this evening, but it plays during the week too, and that adds some, and you get to hear him speak,
sure.
which is great.
Well, thank you.
The Archives of American Art also. Yeah, but
We
have 30
thought
books of
that
research at the
maybe
gallery.
about it at this point, for those of you that would like, the exhibition itself is just on the other side of the door, that perhaps there'd be some questions about specific works, or there's 2 or 3 of them that I'd like to talk about and tell you a little bit about how they were made. This show, by the way, came about because I knew that I had a lot of, a goodly bit of this material comes directly from my storage facility at the gallery. But I was looking through all of this one day, and it struck me, boy, did he ever have a lot of different ways of working. And I went light bulb, and I titled the show Ways of Working, and then tried to find as many different methods for his experimentation. So, are we ready to just go around the corner for anyone who wants to?